Well, hi everybody, Gary Sinclair again. Hope you had a great weekend. Well, in my last post, I talked about the importance of having a good name. Remember that? I hope you were able to watch that. If not, go back and check out the first part. A good name means our reputation. It's what people think of when they picture us and what kind of inner character and maturity do we exhibit, not once or twice, but over time. So yeah, take a look at that first post and you'll see where we left off. But I also promised a follow-up post that talks about greatest names of all. This topic reminds me of a pretty cool experience I had some years ago while attending a counseling conference in Dallas, Texas. One of the major sessions had ended, so people were using the break, to go to the resource room and get a snack, in my case, or head back to their room, which was in the same building. However, during that session that had just ended, I met a guy from the Detroit area who was a hockey fan. And having grown up in that same area, we got talking about the Detroit Red Wings and hockey in general. So we're both going to go upstairs. We're headed for the elevators, and we're waiting there because there are a lot of people all around. And the doors to one set of the many elevators there open, and these two guys walk out. One of which looked kind of familiar, but a lot of people went real fast. So I said to my new friend, "Was that who I think it was?" He said, maybe, they went kind of fast. He says, I got to get going. I said, no problem. I think I'm going to check this out. So I at first thought that, the guy's probably right. But I was going for it anyways. So as people began to cram the multiple elevators, I headed in the direction of the two mystery guys who were well ahead of me, and I really couldn't see them anymore. But I pretty quickly decided that my search was going to be futile. Because now it's mid-afternoon, I'm walking around, and I finally get to the hotel lobby. There's nobody there at that time, except for one guy walking toward me. That day, I met probably the greatest hockey player of all time. It was Wayne Gretzky, honest true. Brief meeting, but pretty exciting. See, interestingly, millions of people around the world would recognize him and his name in an instant. In fact, he's often labeled the Great One. And he is the Great One when it comes to hockey. And there are others that we would maybe call big names in music or business, sports, of course, art, whatever their status. But you know what? There's no greater name than God's name. And really all of God's name, because there are many, it's like a prison of who he is, that even then, others can only give us a taste of his greatness. We only read about a taste of it in the Bible. And Jesus, God in the flesh, has all of those same attributes, sometimes in different terms, because, he's God too. Of course, I can't list here all those names that describe God and their detail, but there's a great book called Praying the Names of God by Anne Spangler that will give you 5 devotionals, one for each weekday, on each of 31 names listed in that book. It's really great, and it will give you a pretty well-rounded picture of the names of God. Get it? You can download it probably online. You could maybe borrow a copy. Remember the story I told you last time about the power of a name in the right context, connected to the right person? I used our son Tim as an example of a name that would get Jackie or me or both of us into the United Center because he works for the Bulls. Well, Jesus is the Son for the world to enter God's family. He came to earth and modeled a God-filled life, but then died and rose again to pay our penalty, our deficiency, our sin, selfishness, call it what you like, that would keep us from entering God's presence. Why? Because God is perfect. And so to connect with him, we must be perfect or have no outstanding warrants, so to speak. Jesus paid for all of that to make us okay, to give us this doorway into heaven. John 14:6 says, there's no other way to God, but it's open to everyone. We don't need to have a big, powerful, influential name to get into heaven and to live with God forever or to have him in our life now. But we need to receive the one with the name that will get us in the door, Jesus. He's the ultimate great one. Check out John 1:12. Then also check out Acts 4:12. Says, there is salvation in no one else, for there's no other name under heaven given among men or women by which we must be saved. See, if you're over 50 or a student of history, you may have seen a famous photo of former President John F. Kennedy in his office in the White House with his young son, who was then known as John John, and he's under the desk near the president's feet. It's a really cute picture, and it won tons of awards. But it's also this perfect picture of how, the son getting entrance to the Father is because he's the son, and he could give entrance to others. You don't just walk in. So when you're discouraged about your own struggles, maybe the challenges in our country and world, remember, there's a name that will always be above all that we're facing. That's why it makes sense to pray prayers in the context of, in the name of Jesus, because that name is what allows us entrance into God's presence in the first place, gives us potential and power to our prayers, and allows us to have a conversation, literally, with the God of the universe. So often, in good times and bad, repeat the greatest name of all, Jesus. Nothing can describe him really, but using a current acrostic that you hear all the time, we could say he's the GOAT, only it stands for the greatest over all things. Did I mention to you that I met Wayne Gretzky? Oh yeah. Talk to you next time.